It's Wacky Anime What If here to present you with What If Subaru Had All for One, Part 1. Let's go and get into it. Currently, Tomura Shigaraki is being punched directly into the gut by Izuku, aka Deku, being brutally beaten down since him and his class are just basically jumping Tomura right now. He's being beaten up by Bakugo's explosions, directly crowning into his face, while Izuku's punching him into the gut, and Todoroki is freezing his legs while he's flying off to the distance while the ice breaks under him, and his leg just gets ripped apart, and it regrows because of a quirk that he had from his, well, predecessor, All for One, who's currently still trying to take over his body while this fight is happening. And immediately, Tomura grabs the ground and starts sliding backwards. Right when he touched the ground with all five fingers and was sliding backwards, he caused the ground to completely decay around him, going all the decay all the way rushing towards Izuku, Todoroki, and Bakugo. And they both just jump up and all of them just jump up in the air. Todoroki using his flames to fly up in the air, while Izuku uses his full cowling and uses as much as into his legs to jump into the air as well. Bakugo maneuvers towards Shigaraki at the exact moment, while Shigaraki looks at all of them and sees Bakugo and grins and thinks, "Hey Bakugo, want to hear something funny?" While Bakugo just says, "What do you want, hand job? I'm trying to kick your ass." As he starts firing explosions directly towards Tomura's face, and Tomura just says, "Guess what? I have the Uno reverse card." As he puts his left hand in front of him, immediately out of his hand pops out a mirror that deflects Bakugo's explosion directly towards him, landing a hit directly to the face, and causing him to fly back a little bit and slide all the way across the ground. And right when he was done sliding, as soon as that was done, Tomura, who still had his hand on the ground and still decaying, it rushed towards Bakugo and decayed his body completely in a mere instant, as Izuku, who barely dodged and is still trying to stay on above the ground by using float, is seeing Bakugo's body get disintegrated, and he feels as much anger as possible. He's never wanted to kill a villain before, but this one, he definitely has to kill. He immediately tells Todoroki to use an actual ice pillar so he can jump off of it. He makes an ice pillar behind Izuku, and Izuku immediately uses the ice pillar before it gets decayed by Shigaraki's current infestation of an attack. While he jumped off of it and started sprinting all the way towards Shigaraki, Shigaraki used his free hand to punch toward Izuku, while both fists connected. Izuku was pushing as hard as possible with as much might as possible in his quirk directly into his right hand, causing the collisions to do a giant shockwave, and that shockwave ended up tumbling a few houses. One was an unfortunate person around the block. This person was named Subaru Natsuki. He was just about to go outside after having a fight with his parents. Immediately leaves out of his house, screaming that he hates them for hiding the fact that he's adopted and not telling them who his parents actually are. And why would they do that to him? It was already bad enough when everyone found out he had a weak quirk and started ostracizing him. But now his parents are lying to him, while his mom and dad are about to walk outside, saying, we didn't mean to hide it for you for this long. It was just hard to tell you. While Subaru looks behind him and says, "I hate you too." While they both look at him and they both say, "We're sorry," before a giant earthquake erupts and giant shockwaves of wind goes by them. And all of a sudden, they hear a cracking sound. Immediately, Subaru looks towards the house and everything happens in slow motion. The house falls down and breaks directly on Subaru's parents. And right when it falls down, it goes all the way on their backs and causes them to fall to the ground a horrifying splat surrounds the entire area. Everything's finally quiet because the shockwaves have stopped. And he sees his parents. Their faces are splat all the way onto the concrete, completely having blood splatters near. And it was terrifying because he just had an argument with them and now they're gone. Why? Why would anyone do this? He falls to the ground directly in front of them and says, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And he starts to cry. His eye bag's getting worse. His tears flowing. And the wind's rapidly picking up with a violent rage, as if sensing his emotions. He says, you guys shouldn't have had to deal with me for so long. I wasn't even your son. Just because I had a weak quirk, I shouldn't have been jealous. I shouldn't have been so damn naive of thinking that I would actually have friends for. Of course, I'm not quirkless, but it doesn't matter. I shouldn't have taken you guys for granted just because I was getting bullied at school or taking my anger out on you. While thinking this and crying directly in front of his parents that are slightly twitching now, and Subaru, seeing this, runs towards him and says, please be okay. He just pulls out his phone and starts calling the ambulance. And immediately hears on the other side, or be in the hospital. What can we do for you? While Subaru says, come to, and immediately bleeps out the actual address. The address known as Subaru's house. And immediately when he says this, says, they're under some trouble. We need someone, the fire department. Someone come here, please. While the operator on the line says, we'll dispatch someone. Please stay with them and try to stop the bleeding wherever it's from. And immediately he hung up, started crying, ripped off his jacket into little pieces and started trying to pull them out by lifting up the actual rubble off of him, but he's way too weak. So he tries to cover up the bleeding that he can. For example, his mother's arm is completely crushed, so he's trying to cover the bleeding, and he thinks he has to probably amputate it, and immediately sees his dad literally completely motionless. His mom's still twitching. He walks towards his dad. Says, Dad, wake up. Please tell me this is a joke. Please tell me this is a nightmare. He screams out in agony as his mom also stops twitching. And Subaru thinks, I'm alone. I'm truly alone. No, I shouldn't have said those things. And immediately hearing something flying beside him, crashing directly into the rubble where his parents were, obliterating their entire body, was a man with a suit and a very horrifying skull of a mask directly there. And honestly, it was an awful thing. You can't even bury their bodies now. They're completely obliterated because this man crashed into it. He looks and sees All Might that punched him into it. And then he looks towards him. And then he notices they're the ones that took them away. It was them. It was them. His eyes filled with so much hatred for both of them. He immediately gets up and says, why would you do such a thing? While the helicopters above have their cameras pointed towards him as he screamed this. And All Might looked at him, and so did All for One. And All for One saw that he looked similar to someone that was deep into his past. A past that no longer belongs to him, and a woman that was taken from him. And immediately thinking, is that who I think it is? No, it couldn't have been. She said he died. Immediately, All Might thinking, what do you mean? And Subaru says, my parents died because your petty fight. Why did you have to fight anyway? Huh? Are you just doing it just to be evil? He points to All for One. And he looks towards All Might. And why didn't you take him out of the city and cause less casualties that way? Your fight, All Might, and you, whoever you are, with a bunny outfit. Mr. Hops, I guess. Why couldn't you have just left this area? You could have just went anywhere else to fight. A less populated area. My parents would still be alive. He cries out, as All for One feels his wounds are getting heavy on him, and immediately lifts his hand towards his left rib, and then looks towards Subaru Natsuki, and thinks, I'm gonna get close to the boy, but I also have to fight Midoriya and All Might, so that they don't end up stopping me from taking that body over. So he immediately makes a shadow double of himself, and puts it directly into his previous spot, while teleporting away in a mere instant, as they're both, and all eyes are focused on Subaru and his little speech he did, while All for One Shadow took his place, injured on the ground, and he was slipping right behind Subaru unnoticed, while All for One's clone rushed towards Midoriya and All Might, punches him directly in the face, and he says, "You shouldn't take your eyes off your opponent," and immediately punches Izuku directly into the stomach, kicks All Might in the dick. And All Might says, "Why'd you go for the All Mights?" And he said, "I don't want you to have any more kids. Symbol of peace," he says mockingly, as he roundhouse kicks him directly into the jaw, causing him to fly away. Then he rushes towards him, punches directly into his weak spot, causing him to fall to the ground, and immediately cough up blood and losing the remainder of One for All, while Izuku immediately uses full cowling at 100% and blitzes directly to the left side of All for One, as he was about to punch All Might directly into the skull with a maximum power punch. Izuku appeared right beside him and was about to punch All for One, and Shigaraki, who currently was in an unknown whereabouts for the majority of the fight, popped out right beside Izuku and had his hand almost placed towards him, until something peculiar happened. All for One immediately ended up disintegrating and just disappearing. And Tomura, who saw this, immediately knew that that was a clone. But if that clone disappeared, that means All for One's dead. He can't be dead. He screams out in rage, as he was almost about to touch Izuku, but that minute of distraction made it to where Izuku flicked his finger towards Tomura's face, launching him into a building, and flinging himself 5 meters away from him, as he immediately started to engage on Tomura. While All for One, POV changed 5 minutes ago. Currently, All for One sneaked up behind Subaru Natsuki, grabbed him by the throat, and put his free hand directly into the front of his face, and said, "This isn't going to hurt. For me, at least. For you, it may hurt a lot. Feel free to scream. No one will hear you." As he ends up infusing his quirk directly into Subaru Natsuki, and it tears away the fiber of his muscles itself. His very flesh, his bones start to mold as this is happening, and they start being replaced by stronger tissue, while All Might is transferring all of his quirks, including himself and All for One, but immediately feels a shiver down his spine, and looks behind him and sees tons of arms surrounding both Subaru and him. But the only difference is the arms are grabbing onto his limbs tightly and ripping them apart, while they're almost very generally grabbing over Subaru very lovingly. While his entire body is being ripped apart by these hands, he managed to put his consciousness into Subaru. And right when he did so, he noticed that he couldn't take control of him, and that unsettled All for One, until he noticed inside of him was a mental quirk that prevented him from taking control for now, he thinks. Immediately, Subaru wakes up 5 minutes later and sees he's in what looks like a cosplay con. I mean, there's furries over there. There's a guy with a what the fuck is that? As soon as he sees just a guy walking around with a giant fucking blade on his back, staring at everyone, and he has an eye patch, and he has dark black armor, and he's just walking around, just swinging his blade at people. Immediately, he thinks, who is that? While getting up, looking at the carnage this man's causing before being taken down by knights. Immediately, Subaru thinks, where am I? Guess I'm not in Kansas anymore. And that's where I'm going to stop. What if Subaru had All for One? I hope you all enjoyed.